Welcome back to Extra Time with Girls on the Ball. This is our very first Super Sub episode of the season. And Lowri Roberts, you're the first one to come and chat to us. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. Feel very privileged to be the first one this season.
The aim of this, I guess, is to try and lift the lid on some of the other areas of the game, the different roles that there are in the game, the different routes there are, I guess, to work in the game. And I think, exploring people like yourselves who've had different roles in this world is a really beneficial place to start, because it takes a lot to get this football stuff going on and going well. And I think, people like yourself are really great people to have in the game. So definitely worth chatting to.
Oh, thanks. No, really looking forward, especially because I feel like we've been on this journey together, right? We've known each other for like 15 years now, or maybe, 13 years now since the very start of the WSL. So it feels a nice opportunity to kind of reflect back on the changes and how the game's changed, I guess, and the needs have changed in terms of a staffing perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And touching back on where we first met was at Bristol, of course, Bristol Academy back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Very different time back then. Bristol were in Champions League football as well. You remember those days? It was a different time, and you were working there for the club, weren't you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And you know what? I wouldn't change that period of my life for anything, right? Because when you reflect back and you think about what that job actually entailed, it was everything. You had to be jack of all trades, and I certainly was master of none. But what that meant was like being able to build your experiences, right, and get a better understanding of all the different areas of the game to hopefully go down a narrower route after that time. My God, I'm glad that the game has evolved since then, though, and there are more than just one full-time member of staff looking after things off the field now.
Do you feel that that's helped you now that you're able to kind of maybe narrow your focus a bit? Is that you kind of know how all the other cogs in the wheel work?
100%, 100%. And I was coming into that role with no expertise and no experiences in things like marketing and communications, commercial, or anything like that. And it makes me cringe a little bit looking back at that time. And I was like responsible for running the social media channels. And at the time, we had Siobhan Chamberlain as a goalkeeper, and she was the digital ambassador. Do you remember those? The digital ambassadors. And an absolute media mogul, right? She was such an expert in social media. And I just remember the amount of times that she would have to teach me how to post, or, oh, Instagram, this is new. We need an Instagram channel. Okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? Or the amount of times she would text me and be like, hey, you've uploaded this, but you've done it wrong. I'd be like, thanks, thank you for that. Thank you for highlighting that. So, just a really steep learning curve, I think. And the players back then as well, they were having to do so much more than just concentrate on playing, which meant, I think it made the bonds between kind of the players and the staff and the community and the fans quite unique back at Bristol during those times.
For sure. I think it's maybe in different ways, but quite similar to us as well. And that, I mean, we self-taught ourselves a lot of things, but we find ourselves doing a lot of different roles, even to this day. And I guess the game has progressed, but there are still elements of it where that is needed. So that kind of multifaceted skill set is pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, especially for me now, when I'm like, a lot of my work now will be building strategies or building a new program, or kind of plans for different organizations, and being able to say that I've got that lived experience in those different areas and knowing how each area kind of complements the other. I think that's, that certainly helped me.
You made the step to the FA then, didn't you, after Bristol?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's like the pathway, kind of like, it's, you don't know what you don't know, right? And my career path, I'm a farmer's daughter from rural mid Wales, right? So I grew up thinking, oh, a good job in my area was a teacher. I was going to uni to learn to be a teacher. And that's when I first started working in the game, spent my summers coaching out in America. And just this little farmer's daughter being exposed to kind of the women's game out in the US, it certainly sparked something inside me to kind of think, wow, the opportunities out here are huge, but also like a bit sparked a bit of a rage inside me around how women's football wasn't as big in the UK and the lack of opportunities, the lack of exposure. So I knew back then that it was definitely wanting to make change in how women are viewed in sports that I wanted to get into. What that role would end up looking like, I didn't know. I thought I was going to go down the coaching route. I spent early few years as a coach part-time at Bristol, over in Cardiff, while I was doing my master's and doing some sport development roles. And I really thought it was coaching I was going to go into. And then I stepped onto the FA's, they had a female coach mentoring program at the time that was run by Brent Hills. What a guy, he's supported so many female coaches along the way. And I remember being on this, it was called the A License Prep course, right? So there were maybe 10 different female coaches on this course looking to, progress as coaches, the likes of Vicky Jepson, Lydia Bedford, people like that. And that course was brilliant for me because I realized that I was way out of my depth as a coach. And it was time to go back to the drawing board and find a new role. And the Bristol job certainly opened my eyes to my passion for kind of marketing, promoting the game. And that's the role that I first went into at the English FA, marketing, Women's Super League, Women's FA Cup, and supporting around the Lionesses. And again, back then, it was just me and Cecil Ganild-Hartley. We were the only two responsible for marketing, promotion, social media, email marketing, website, supporting the clubs develop their marketing strategies. Just the two of us across the whole of women's football. And how that department has grown now is just amazing to see.
Feels like you've been at the forefront of a lot of things. You must enjoy a challenge, because then you went from the English FA when they were really starting to properly tap into marketing and exposing the leagues and exposing the Lionesses, and you took that back to Wales, to the Welsh FA. Was that a dream role when that came up and you just thought, oh my God, like I have to go for this? If you tell our listeners a little bit about what you did there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like my dad is a proud Welshman. It always used to really bother him when he saw me in English kit. We're wearing the three lions. That always used to not sit right with him. So he was super proud when I got the Wales job. So yeah, I'd done 5 years at the English FA, living in London. Had the time of my life. We'd had a brilliant time. I'd spent 2 years then in the commercial team, partnerships management team. So got to, and that was just working with the Lionesses. So got to experience, international camps, and Euro 2017 was the tournament that I worked with the Lionesses. So that was, a new experience. And then the job at Wales came up, and it absolutely was the dream job. It was head of women and girls football in my home nation. And they'd never had that role before. And initially I didn't actually go for it because, I thought, oh gosh, this is way too senior for me. There's no way they would even consider me. And it's funny, isn't it? Because I use this stat a lot in some of the programs that I run, the B Football Mentoring Program, that women will only apply for a job when they meet 90% of the job specification, the criteria, versus men who will apply for a job when they meet 40% of the criteria. And it's funny how, certain people have a big impact on your career. And I've spent a lot of time recently reflecting on kind of the importance of kind of mentors and people in your corner that you need to nudge you sometimes. And it was Professor Laura McAllister back in Wales that kind of sent me the job description and said, hey, I hope you've seen this and I hope you're applying for it. And I said, oh gosh, no way, I'm not ready for such a big role. She said, no, hang on a minute. You tick all of these boxes. You've done coaching, sport development. You've worked at a huge governing body in the English FA. You've done marketing. You've done international game. You've exposure to that commercial. She was like, you have to go for this. I was like, oh, okay. So, getting that role was, and just holding that role for 5 years was such an honor. And I feel such a privilege to have, I suppose, held the torch for women and girls football in that kind of first time they'd had a head of women's football that sat around the senior leadership table. And with that comes a big responsibility, I think.
Yeah, absolutely the right person for the job. And as I said, at the forefront of things more often than not.
I was just going to mention for our listeners that we've had quite a few experiences with you, Lowri, where you sent us off around various different cities. So Amsterdam, to find some drums for the Lionesses. I remember us traipsing around Amsterdam for a day to go and buy some drums to bring back. I think it was the England.
Brilliant.
It's the first time we beat France. In like however long it's been,
1971 or something.
In the Netherlands, and Rachel and Mosh at the time were on the drums all through the game, giving everyone a headache.
Just always looking at new and innovative ways. Okay, and I think what's really special about the women's football community is some of those relationships that you build along the way. You know, we're all in it for the same reasons, right? We want to grow, we want to succeed, etc. So I think, you know, those relationships and those friendships, you know, that we've made along the way are so important.
Sure. I mean, you could call on us to go and get that job done. So I'm glad you could.
We will, of course, talk a bit more on the value and importance of networking. But maybe talk to us a little bit about your role now, because you took another big leap, didn't you?
Yeah, so I've done the role at Wales for 5 years, and I've got a little boy now, Harry. He's 5 years old, and he was starting primary school last September, and that kind of came with a big shift for us, a big change, because you know I felt like he needed us around a little bit more. And my role at Wales, it was all consuming, right? I was so all in with that role. I was working weekends, evenings, and sometimes just not very present at home, because I guess I was so obsessed with the job and so available to people within that role. So for me, I kind of looked back at, okay, I've got this, 15 years experience working in the women's game across lots of different areas. And I was thinking about the changes that we're seeing in the women's game now. And I do sometimes think there's a bit of a gap in terms of experiences and people that have been there, have done it, who know the pitfalls and know the challenges. So I saw an opportunity, really. And I guess I took a bit of a bold move to go out by myself. And set up as a consultant, specializing in women's sport. But at the minute, all of my clients are specifically football, so women's football, which is an absolute dream for me. And it means that I think I just have a little bit more bandwidth at home now, but also the projects, because they're projects and they might be for 6 months, they might be for a year, a couple of years, but you can pick them up, do a really good job, put your whole heart into it, and then move on to the next thing. And I'm just really enjoying the freedom and the flexibility, but of course missing feeling part of a team. I think, part of an organisation.
It's always that balance, isn't it? Because I guess when you were at Wales, as you say, it's all consuming, and you really are so invested in making it a success. And as you say, it was like quite a small team, and you're quite stretched as well. And there's so much to do in terms of building the game back in Wales, and not just like the international team, but the domestic side of it as well. Is it probably a bit of a struggle at times, I can imagine. So having that kind of all the time can be quite all encompassing.
Yeah, no, definite. And now, just really enjoying the new experiences that are coming my way, because we knew we wanted to move back to Wales, when we had Harry. But I do miss that traveling, right? And actually, I think it's really important and healthy for me to have that identity away from just being a stay-at-home mum that works, remotely and then picks up Harry from school. I love traveling. I love, meeting new people. So this consultancy gig that I'm now doing, I get to travel a fair bit with it, but it's, works around my family life at the minute. So I still get to travel a bit, but the majority of my time is back here in Cardiff. So at the minute, best of both worlds.
Mad to think, if you think back to when we met 12, 13 years ago, like if you told us all that we would be doing now what we're doing as our jobs, it would be hard to believe, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when I look back at, you guys, when you took a gamble, right? You were doing all of this, investing so much of your own money to travel across the world, to follow the game and tell the stories, because there weren't that many people telling the stories of women's football. You guys obviously took that kind of leap of faith to eventually go out, leave your full-time jobs and go out and do this full time. And I think in women's football, we're trying to catch up, right? We've got 150 years of of underinvestment, being banned for crying out loud for large parts of it, and not having, a level playing field. We're trying to catch up, so we have to move quickly, and for us to be able to lead change quickly, we need to take some risks. So I think the risk taking in women's football should be encouraged.
For sure. I think it's still about, like, yes, we've developed a long way, but we're still having to fight against the structures that have always been there as well. So the women's great game in the last 13 years has massively skyrocketed, but we're still battling, I think, at times against the structures that have always well-established structures that say this is what should be done and how this should be done. And I don't know about you, but we often talk about how the women's game has such a space to grow in if we just allow it to. And I think we have a lot of people, I imagine, like us three, but a lot more than that, who have been in the game for a while, saying this is what we need to do. We need to, to expand out and do something a bit different and take risks. And yet we're always battling against these structures that are saying, do it the way that men's game's done.
Definite. And like you say, we're trying to almost like untangle all of the, the systems and structures that have been built for men by men, right? So when you're trying to unravel all of that and almost try and encourage people to see the needs of women and girls football and how we should develop and grow them, there's that takes a lot of energy. I think it takes a lot of lobbying and trying to win the hearts of minds. But also for me, we're still a long way off having a fair voice around the decision-making table. And I think that's one of my fears now, is when we see the makeup of the Women's Super League, and obviously the clubs are now shareholders. All of the WSL clubs are now backed by Premier League men's clubs, right? And so the voice from those clubs at the decision-making table with the league are going to be people that historically have come from a background of men's football. So I think one of the biggest challenges for the future of the women's game, to ensure that we don't just copy and paste how things have been done in the men's game, is to ensure that people from women's football, whether that's staff, fans or players, probably most importantly, that they have an equal voice in decision making.
Worries me too.
Yeah. One of the kind of ways of addressing that, or trying to address that, are the networks that you're involved in and the mentoring programs that you're involved in as well. I know you want to talk about Be Football Mentoring at Wales as well, which is a program helping women progress their careers in football. There's also Women in Football. How valuable, I know you've been involved in some of these networks, how valuable have they been to you, and how valuable do you think they'll be to addressing some of those issues that concern us?
Huge. I think having that support network. Look, in women's football, we need to be able to take risks. We need to do brave work. And in order for us to do brave work, we're going to need that kind of support structure around us, that if we fail or if we're, facing great challenges, that we have people around us that are there to support us and be there for us, right? And I feel so lucky with the number of kind of role models or people that I have in my network. I'm going to quote Brene Brown to you now, because Gemma Granger is somebody who is certainly in my very close network of allies and supporters. And she introduced Brene Brown's work to me, and she bought me a book, Dare to Lead, it's called. And in there, Brene Brown talks about your square squad. And your square squad is, you should be able to fit your really important support network, people in your support network, into a piece of paper that's the size of a little Post-it note. So it's not that you've got this huge support network, but you have this square squad of people that can really support and challenge you, right? It can be honest with you and challenge you. And I feel so lucky to have three people in my square squad. Mentioned her before, Laura McAllister, a Welshie that I'm very lucky to have as a mentor and a role model to me here in Wales. She's the first female vice president at UEFA, as in doing some incredible work. So she's one. Gemma Granger is another one. She's someone that she talks about us being in the arena together, right? That women's football arena. Two women that were involved with the Welsh FA for a few years. And I probably spoke during that time. I probably spoke to Gemma more than I spoke to my mum, in terms of, and it would be something nothing to do with on pitch matters. I would speak to her and get her advice, and vice versa. Would be discussing different kind of challenges in the women's game on a weekly basis. basis. So I'm very grateful for that. And then the third person, I was 27, right, when I first joined the English FA, when I first had a really good line manager. And I think that's where the Be Football mentoring program, where I was inspired to kind of create that program, is because up until the age of 27, that's quite late on in your career, right? To have had your first good line manager, a line manager who was really invested in my progression and my development. And Cecil Gunild Hartley, she was marketing manager for women's football there, and then brand manager for England men's and women's. She's now over in Norway as head of strategy for the NFF, and someone that really encouraged me to be a strategic thinker and really kind of helped develop me. And that's why I think networks are so important. They're people that can challenge you, but can also be there to support you. And women in football, you've just touched on women in football. I think they provide such a brilliant network for women either starting their careers in the game when you don't know anybody, right? And it can feel a bit scary, right the way up into like women in senior leadership positions, supporting them as well.
I think as well, the advice to people listening then would be, your network doesn't always have to be people within the industry you're working in as well. Like you touched on line managers there. I've had it's a rare experience to have a really good one. And sometimes when you get someone, you think, I'm going to hang on to you. And even when I leave, you still touch base. And whether it's about queries about applying for a job or whatever it might be, to have someone who can maybe give you that perspective. Sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, right? Especially when you're doing your own business, and having that perspective can be really valuable. And you have to hold on to those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone that you feel comfortable with being quite vulnerable in front of and say, do you know what, I'm really struggling with this area or with this person, and kind of being able to kind of talk through a situation with somebody that you trust implicitly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to ask, when you mentioned Gemma there, because you managed to entice her to Wales to the coaching job away from the FA as well. She'd been in coaching within the FA system. And I guess that was her big leap as well, to go from that system to become a head coach of a national team who had big aspirations of moving up in, European football, and the challenges that brought. So how did that go about, managing to get her over to Wales?
Oh gosh, do you know what? Me and Gemma obviously worked at the English FA, and whilst it's amazing to be in a federation which has got so much resources and so many people, and obviously the depth of players, the quality of the clubs in the league, etc., what Wales offered was an opportunity to put your mark on something. What Wales was for me, and in that head of women's football role, but also for Gemma, was somewhere where you could really put your mark on it. And that because they're a smaller federation, they encourage you to be innovative, to do things differently. And I think that really appeals to Gemma, that she could come in and really put her mark on something, really make a stamp on it. And I'm obviously gutted for Wales that they lost Gemma, because we're on a 4-year, we signed up for this 4-year project. World Cup was almost like a free hit, right? Because it was only 11 European nations that qualify for a World Cup, and knowing that the Euro campaign was the big one, right, in this whole 4-year program, because the FAW has invested significantly into the women's national team program, and it all comes up to these next two playoff matches against Slovakia, and hopefully another 2 potentially against the Republic. So I think they've done a great job to get Rhian Wilkinson in, someone with extensive experience as a player, been to major tournaments as a player. And as a fan now, I'll be going, watching from the other side, feeling nervous, but very excited for what is, I believe, 2 of the biggest and most important months in women's national team history in Wales.
Absolutely. So we've kind of taken a bit of a journey through your career. You've kind of almost come full circle, because I'm right in saying that Bristol City are one of your clients, right? So you've kind of come full circle now, and you've come back there, and I believe they stick in your heart, don't they? And I'm thinking there's a women's football strategy coming out soon. What can you? What little sneak peeks can you give us?
And do you know what? It does feel full circle that my first client in the consultancy capacity is Bristol City, and also doing some really exciting work with UEFA as well. But maybe I will touch on that after. But the gig with Bristol City, Gavin Marshall, who's the CEO of Bristol Sport and is the chair of Bristol City Women, he asked me to come in at the start of the year because he recognises that the women's game is moving at such a pace, and maybe the staffing structure and the strategy needs to be different for the next 3 years compared to what it has been over the last kind of five or 6 years. So what a privilege it's been working back with Bristol over the last kind of 6 months. I was brought in to help them put in place a fit for future staffing structure and develop their new women's football strategy. And I don't think maybe you have met Romane before, haven't you? Yeah, Soph's met her. You did an interview.
I've interviewed her for The Guardian, yeah.
Right. So I'm sitting here feeling really smug, by the way, because Gavin allowed me to lead the recruitment on their first head of women's football. They've never had that role before. So Romane Pinnock has just been appointed as the head of women's football at Bristol City Women. And she's from South Africa, so they needed to go through a visa process. And I was feeling a little bit nervous. Is she real? Does she really exist? I kept joking with Gavin and the HR department that she's like a unicorn, right? In terms of what we needed in that role. We needed someone that could lead the commercialization of women's football at Bristol City. We needed someone that really understood the unique selling points of women's football and how women's football can be used to create real meaningful change in our communities and in society, and somebody that got high performance environments. And she is amazing. She's the perfect fit for Bristol City. And it's been such a pleasure getting to know her over the last few weeks to finalize this strategy that we're looking to launch on the 20th. And a couple of things that, I'll give you a sneak preview in terms of a couple of things to look out for in that strategy. One, which probably won't surprise you, Bristol has always been a club that have been very, very good at developing homegrown players, right? Homegrown talent. They've had to be, right? Because they don't have the big budgets of the Chelseas and the Arsenals. So a big focus on talent ID and recruitment. They've appointed their first ever head of recruitment and talent ID in Michelle Ewell. She's someone from the Southwest. Most recently was at Southampton with their Girls Academy. And she's one of Bristol City's values is to be maverick, right? And Michelle is absolutely maverick. She is going to find new and innovative ways to talent ID and recruit. And I really do believe that the market is changing in terms of driving revenue through player trading. And so that will feature in the strategy. And the other thing is, you guys have seen right from the beginning of the WSL, Bristol Academy, then Bristol City have always had a very special bond with the community. The players buy into their, the impact that they can have in the community so strongly. So there will be a lot in the strategy around how we're working with the players to develop and to shape a community engagement program, a social impact program, where we really utilize the players through that. I won't share any more about that, but it has been such a joy to work with the players in shaping this program. They are incredible, right? We've got 3 master's students in the cohort, and so some special things to come out of that strategy. I hope you'll see.
I think it's really important, and maybe something that we take for granted over here sometimes. I remember, I think I did an interview with Casey Stoney when she just took the San Diego Wave job. And she was saying how she'd never had to do like the kind of outreach like it back at home, because it was a new club and they had to go out into the community and show what they're about and try and drag people to the great game and give them that kind of San Diego feel and why they should come and watch. And I think sometimes with the English game, because of all of that, as you said, the Premier League clubs, we go for the badge, and whether it's Chelsea or Man United or wherever it might be, and they're all doing good work, but at the same time, they're not really doing that outreach kind of work. So I find that really interesting. And I remember, I know she's now at City, but interviewed Naomi Lozelle at the beginning of the year when she was with the under-23s with England, and she was talking how she loved to go and do her like charity work in Bristol, and she went out, and it was one of her favourite like pastimes to do. So I think you really can see that embedded in the players. It's really nice to hear those kind of stories.
Definite. And I think, at Bristol, they do a really good job at seeing the person, not just the player, right? And every single player or every single person is unique, and that we should embrace their authenticity and embrace what it is that they want to achieve, both on the field and off the field, because what they might want to achieve on the field might be very different, within the group. They've got a lot of really young players, coming through the pathway, and thinking about what they might want to achieve off the field. And for me, what we've done through this program that we're building with the players is we're trying to make them realize how important and impactful their stories are and how unique they are, right? And how young children in particular can learn some great life lessons from hearing about the stories of the players. And hopefully we're upskilling the players as well, that they'll feel that we're upskilling them in how to communicate with impact, how to public speak, how to present, because when it comes to life away from playing, you're going to have to apply for jobs, or you're going to have to do a lot of presentations or public speaking. Hopefully they'll feel that we're upskilling them away from the pitch as well.
Also really important because you cover quite a large catchment area as well, really, in the scheme of things. I remember Lauren Smith last year was saying, like, you go right up to, like, Oxford almost. So, like, there's a huge catchment area that isn't served by a women's football team at the highest level in that area. And so you're having to, outreach into much larger maybe respect than maybe some other teams are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Bristol City, because they don't have the power of a Premier League brand, they've got to find different ways to really connect in a meaningful way with the community. So the community will show up for them at Ashton Gate, because I think that, just to pick up on Ashton Gate as a phenomenal stadium for women's football and women's sport, right? You think about Bristol Bears, women's rugby, they play a number of games there, and the Red Roses play a number of games there. In fact, the Red Roses game at Ashton Gate is the highest attended women's rugby game outside of Twickenham, and Ashton Gate are hosting 2 quarterfinals and both semi-finals for the Women's Rugby World Cup next year. So as a catchment area, the whole of the Southwest, Ashton Gate is this absolute, incredible platform for women's sport to shine. And I think, that's something we're hoping to build on, the link between Bristol Bears and Bristol City women, because we all come under the same group. And Bristol Bears, they're a phenomenal rugby team, filled with internationals, English, Welsh, Irish, Scottish, an incredible force for women's sport in the Southwest at Ashton Gate, I think.
Yeah, Bristol are always a club that we kind of use as an example when we talk about different ways of doing things and successful ways of doing things. So hopefully you continue in that vein as leading the way in that respect. In terms of your career, and if you were kind of giving advice to anyone getting into the game or wanting to get into the game and maybe not being 100% sure what it is they want to do, what advice would you give them? Because I guess you were thinking you were going to go down the coaching path, and then something else came up entirely and it's led to this.
Yeah, and I'm lucky enough that I still work on the Be Football mentoring program in Wales now. And that program, I set it up a couple of years ago, and that program was literally built on what I felt was missing for me when I started out on my career. So it's a few different things. Number one, it's workshops. So it's upskilling the women that are wanting to progress a career in football. So it's things like how to network, presentation skills, all of these different things. I'm spending a lot of time on purpose and values and how you articulate, how you sell yourself really, and who you are, what you stand for. Mentoring. So we match them up with a mentor. And then it's shadowing opportunities and experiences. And Caris Ingram, who coordinates that program, she's taken the program to the next level this year. The 15 mentees that are on the program have had opportunities in press conferences, Freanne Wilkinson and Craig Bellamy's press conferences. They've gone and supported on match days to support match day operations. They've been and shadowed international camps, whether that be youth teams, boys or girls, and a whole host of other shadowing opportunities. Because like I said at the beginning, right, You don't know what you don't know. You know, people look at football and think, oh, I wish I could work in football. And they seem, oh, maybe it's marketing I want to do, or maybe it's a physio. There are so many roles out there, and you don't know what those roles look like until you've had an opportunity. And I think a lot of it comes back down to confidence, right? Oh, I don't want to put somebody out. Or if I send somebody a message, a DM on LinkedIn, what if they never respond to me? Who cares, guys? You need to just like forget about your ego and think, okay, let's be super proactive in reaching out to people and asking for opportunities to shadow, asking for opportunities to pick somebody's brains about how they went for a job interview or how they progressed up the ladder. Because if I tell someone told me this recently when they were giving top tips about asking someone about top tips when it comes to networking. If you ask somebody, oh, I would love to get your advice or your help on this area, feels really good to be asked, right? It feels really good to be asked. You'd have to be a monster to say no and turn somebody down. So be brave enough to ask the question.
I think it's really important. Like, I'd have loved that, because I remember when we first started going to press boxes, having not been in press boxes, and it took me a good couple of years where I would be confident enough to ask a question. And I was probably one of the few people there who had been there, you know, around the game for the last 6 or 7 years and seen everything. But I just didn't have the confidence that it was my place to ask a manager a question about the game. And it's all about that kind of, as you say, the confidence to be able to do that and to be able to have those kind of situations where there's less pressure in terms of like shadowing or mentoring, where you can see what's actually happening, so that when you actually get to that point, rather than being thrust in at the deep end, you're ready to.
Yeah. You're so right. You're so right.
Well, it's been great chatting to you and running over our history and your history. And I've no doubt you'll continue being at the forefront of many things in the women's game. You are making a great impact, and I'm sure you've inspired many today with our chat as well.
Oh, thanks. Great to be on. And let's hope that Republic of Ireland and Wales both get past the first round of qualifiers. And we'll see you in Dublin on the 2nd of December for a pint.